Welcome to Healing Our Relationships, the podcast. I'm Marisa, healer, transformation guide, and someone who has spent the last 17 years coming home to herself. This podcast was born from a powerful circle I lead each month, where women gather live on Zoom to unearth their codependent patterns, reclaim their truth, and return home to themselves. Here, I bring these same teachings and transmissions to you. Each episode, I'll help you understand what codependency actually is, not in a clinical or shame-based way, but through the lens of spiritual healing and personal empowerment. We'll explore the real impact these patterns have on your nervous system, your relationships, your sense of self, and your spirit. I'll offer grounded tools, guided inquiries, perception shifts, and an invitation to heal in community, not just alone. This is a space for deep truth-telling, for remembering who you are beneath the stories and the shape-shifting, and for walking each other home. You don't have to do this perfectly, you just have to begin. So let's get started. So before we get into today's episode, I have an invitation for you. I'm going to start something new on the podcast, and I would really love for you to be a part of it. Each month, I want to dedicate an episode to one of your stories. So a real, raw, honest share about what you're struggling with in your relationships. Instead of just giving surface level advice, I want to read your story on the podcast, anonymously, of course, and respond with reflection, insight, and tools to help you navigate what you're going through. And while it's absolutely meant to help you, what is so powerful about us sharing our stories is that everyone listening most likely has been through or is walking through something similar. And there is so much power in doing this work in community. And when we're walking through something and someone else is as well, we feel far less alone. And the amount of honesty and vulnerability that it takes for you to share your story in this way is really inspiring for not only me, but other people. So if you have a story, if you're stuck in an uncomfortable relationship, if you're in a relationship that you want to leave, but you're really confused, it's just if you're navigating a painful relationship in your life, it doesn't have to be romantic. It can be any kind of relationship. It could even be a relationship to your job. If there is a question that you're carrying that you can't seem to answer, a space where you feel stuck, if you just want to feel held and seen, if your heart is hurting, if you keep waking up in these patterns over and over again and you can't seem to stop it, whatever it is, I invite you to submit your story. So just write it out. Don't worry about your writing being amazing or anything. Just do your best, as authentic as you can, to write it out. I would say about, 2 to 3 pages max. The whole episode will be dedicated to the story. So to submit your story, you'll just email me at marisa@healwithalchemy.com with the subject line podcast story. Okay, so today we're going to dive into compliance patterns of codependency. And we're going to do this again by tuning into some core beliefs that exist and drive compliance. Compliance isn't just about being nice or easygoing, which often we can tell ourselves a story that we don't care and we let other people make decisions and kind of run the show in our lives. Is typically a learned response where our nervous system has learned that agreement equals safety. So it's what happens when your inner child maybe learned to keep the peace, or it could manifest later in relationships. Maybe you've had partners or relationships where you felt very empowered and like the leader, and then you fall in love or enter into a relationship with somebody who's more controlling and dominant, and the dynamic becomes so uncomfortable. So you begin to shapeshift and go one down and start complying again to keep the peace, to avoid rejection, to avoid anger, to be easy. These compliance patterns can look like just immediately saying yes without even checking in with yourself. A big one is feeling so much discomfort when someone is upset with you. So you do everything you can to avoid them being upset, or you immediately rush to fix it. Compliance can look like abandoning your values, your boundaries, and your needs to stay connected. It can look like avoiding conflict at all cost. And that self-abandonment, really, that's when it starts to feel like you're being kind of eaten away, like your soul and spirit is starting to feel like it's just disintegrating. Compliance in my world, while I carried so many low self-esteem patterns, compliance was the one that ultimately I felt like destroyed my soul. It was where so much self-abandonment was occurring in my life. So, in thinking about what beliefs and agreements and stories are attached to these patterns, I picked out a few that I felt are the river beneath the river, as I like to call it, that run deep below the surface of these patterns in our lives. So, the ones that we're going to cover today are: if I speak up, I'll be rejected. I'm responsible for how other people feel. I am safer if I don't disappoint anyone. And if I leave, I will be replaced. If I leave, what if they change? That's a really hard one. So let's start with: if I speak up, I will be rejected, or it's not safe to speak my mind. There's many different ways we can say this belief and agreement and story. So I want you to think about areas in your life where you fear that your truth will cost you connection. I want to say that again. You fear that your truth will cost you connection. This can look like: what if I'm too much? It's too much what I need. Or what if I ask for what I need and it makes them upset and they'll leave? It's this constant holding back. It can be sugarcoating or wrapping what you really want in like a half truth, or even using humor, like making fun of yourself, or it's just you don't feel fully safe to live in your authenticity. You feel the need to edit to stay acceptable. It can also show up as like avoiding really difficult conversations, performing or pretending that you feel okay even when you're actually distressed. So it's a lot of staying in silence to keep the peace. Now, what's so tricky about this is while your external world feels more peaceful, and I put that in quotation marks, your internal world is most likely suffering. And in the moment, without awareness, so if you're just doing these behaviors and you don't even realize it, and then you're suddenly like, gosh, why don't I trust myself? Why don't I trust my feelings? Why do I feel so much conflict? There's this confusion around why you don't have self-trust. When in awareness, when you realize the shape-shifting you're doing and the amount that you're hiding your voice, you realize suddenly that how could I possibly trust myself internally on a deep, connected level when I've been speaking lies to other people, when I've been showing up not as myself? No wonder there's no self-trust. These patterns, they begin to have this kind of life of their own that is, again, like deteriorating under the surface, a deep love and reverence for yourself. And it's so painful and hard when those patterns actually work for a little bit, right? Like, okay, if I don't say the thing, I'm not going to get the reaction. If I just go with the flow, I'm going to keep the peace. And what that does is it gives the power to the other person in the relationship. And especially if the other person leads from a place of anger or rage or narcissistic behaviors where you are being manipulated and gaslit and you start to believe that like your experience isn't real, because every time you do choose to come forward with a feeling or an experience, the other person immediately disregards it, makes excuses for their behavior, gets angry at your feelings. Who wants to feel and experience that? Nobody. And when you're not feeling empowered and deeply connected to yourself, And when you're not feeling the freedom on the other side of this codependency work, then you immediately acquiesce and you immediately feel even like worse. At least that was my experience and the experience of a lot of the people that I work with. When I started to have the courage to stop these behaviors, even though it made the person in my life upset, what happened is after a while, after building that muscle, if that person was angry, instead of being afraid of their anger, I was actually completely disconnected to it. And I was like, I felt kind of sorry for their immaturity. And would have this experience of be like, well, that's not mine to carry, so you can go figure that out. I've got other things to do. I'm not going to placate into that behavior. And then guess what happens for the other person is that they have to hold themselves. They have to figure out how to handle their own anger or their own disappointment or their own annoyance. And so we change the dance that we're doing with our partners when we start to stop showing up in ways that are inauthentic to who we are. When we stop trying to manage and control somebody else's experience of life, because they are responsible for their own discomfort and anger. They are responsible for their patterns of codependency, which might be control. In living in love and reverence for yourself, the story I invite you to consider is, can I trust that I am worthy of speaking my truth? And can I trust that the right people can handle my truth? And if someone can't handle my truth and they walk away, that is their right and responsibility. And they are free to go. So let me say that again, just in a different way, because I really want to make sure this lands for you. In staying in a place of love and reverence for myself, not silencing myself, saying my truth, I will trust that I am worthy of my truth. I will trust that my truth matters. I will also trust that people can handle my truth. And if somebody walks away and they can't handle my truth, then they have that right to do so. I don't want to make anybody love me. And I don't want to make anybody love a version of me that isn't real. That's not fair to me, and that's not fair to them. So as you move through this week, I want you to be in a place of compassionate observation around where you're silencing yourself. And one of the things that I want you to notice when you're placing compassionate awareness around this is, what is your truth? And maybe you can write that down in your phone. A lot of times you're not really ready to necessarily run out, create these boundaries and set these truths. And what can happen is when you suddenly start doing it and the person you're in relationship with isn't used to it, it actually causes more conflict for them. And that can bump back to you, and then you can feel really disoriented. So you need to be really patient with these practices and be patient with yourself. It's going to take some time for you to build up your self-confidence and your self-worth and your self-value and this like deep reverence for yourself. It's going to take some time. So if you can't say your truth, love yourself through that and write your truth down. Start to begin to compile a little book of truths for yourself. Because the more you start to unfold and see those truths, the more confidence you're going to have, the more you're going to start valuing and loving yourself. I promise. You can take those other tiny steps as well. Okay, let's talk about I'm responsible for how other people feel. But before I dive into that, I want to invite you all to get the book and read the book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. The 4 agreements are very simple. They are: be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. But when I read that book, I realized they were practices, and I struggled with disaster mind and fear and this constant narrative of fear and self-hate and confusion in my head. And when I began practicing these agreements, it completely changed my life. And one of the things that it changed is I stopped making assumptions about how everybody was judging me. I stopped making assumptions that if I was myself, I would be rejected. I started to have the courage to not pretend like I knew what was going on in everyone's head. And then I realized that other people's response to me was not just about me, that nothing other people do is because of me. It's a projection of their own reality. And that doesn't mean I can't have boundaries and just let people do whatever they want. But the truth is that it isn't personal. And so I just want to invite you to read that book because I think it would be super supportive to healing your compliance patterns. And what's really cool is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is going to be on the podcast probably in the next month or so. So that's another treat I'm going to have for you, is that each month I'm going to bring a special guest that has an incredible wisdom and knowledge to share. And so I just feel that this book could really be supportive. I also talk about beliefs and agreements a lot, and it's from the Toltec lineage and the studying I've done with the Ruiz family. So if you want to dive deeper in this work, it is a really good place to start. Okay, so being responsible for other people's feelings. What's really interesting about this is I think that this might manifest as a head thing, but it becomes a complete nervous system autopilot experience. That we are convinced that other people's discomfort is our fault. And this can look like walking on eggshells, managing someone's moods, monitoring every word to prevent someone else's reaction. It's constantly trying to protect people from their own feelings. And that is actually enabling them not taking care of themselves. It's not loving to them to take on their emotions, especially not at the expense of our own. It can also look like over-apologizing. One thing I noticed inside of this compliance pattern was because in my own life, I needed a lot of affirmation to feel safe. I would overly affirm, over-apologize, over-explain myself to other people because I was so uncomfortable in my life that I automatically made an assumption that everybody else needed just as much affirmation and love as me. But I would do it at the cost of myself. It was at the cost of my own authenticity. And so when you engage in this belief and story that it's my job to make everybody comfortable and manage their feelings and emotions, then you become this version of yourself that you think other people will find acceptable. You shrink because you don't want to be uncomfortable. That's what's really interesting about it, is that consciously we think, oh, we don't want that person to be uncomfortable. But really, it normally ties back to you don't want to be uncomfortable with somebody being uncomfortable with you. And as functional adults, not children who are all running around trying to protect themselves, we are all responsible for our own discomfort. So as you move through the week, I want to invite you into a place of awareness. Begin noticing when you shift or shrink to make people more comfortable. And can you allow there to be a little discomfort? And instead of hypervigilantly trying to make sure the other person is okay, can you stay with yourself inside of discomfort? The biggest tool that you're going to have inside of this healing work is staying with yourself. It is allowing for feelings. It is asking questions of yourself. It is better getting to know who you are, why you respond, where that fear is coming from, so that you can help heal it. Because, as we know, most of the time, these behaviors have come from family of origin or society of origin. If you think about women's roles in our society and how we were really raised to prioritize the needs and feelings and comfort of others, the generational trauma that has happened. This stuff lives deeply in our bones and our DNA. And so you're carrying more than your own discomfort. But the invitation is to sit with yourself. Awareness first. Notice. I'm going to notice when I'm engaging in this behavior, and then I'm going to ask, can I have just a little discomfort and stay with myself instead? Even if that's like, I'm going to take 2 minutes to sit with my discomfort before I go try to fix this. It's okay to live inside of tiny changes. It's going to be what's required of you at first because this can be really scary. if you avoid discomfort at all cost. And you can ask yourself some reflection questions around this, like, who taught me that this is my role to make sure other people were okay? Who have I watched in my life shapeshift for other people to keep the peace? And then this is a really powerful reflection question. If you can come back and write these down and actually do some journaling on them, I think that would be amazing. But what would it feel like for you to let someone sit with their own discomfort? In healing our relationships, we allow other people to have their own experience, even if it means they're uncomfortable. Inside of healing our relationships, we stay anchored in our center while other people are uncomfortable. So that is what you're working towards. Okay, we have 2 more core beliefs to discuss, and we're going to start with, it's safer if I don't disappoint anyone. So if I disappoint you, I will lose you. And in the last episode, we did talk a lot about perfectionism. And as you can see, that is a thread and theme that goes through all of these patterns, is not really letting someone down. But let's just focus on a very tender wound for people who had a lived experience of conditional love. That when they performed as they were, quote, supposed to, if they were agreeable, available, easy to be around, didn't make waves, didn't cause problems, then they were loved. And when they were not acting as they, quote unquote, should be, then they received a lot of disappointment or anger or frustration or comments. So disappointment really felt like danger and a lot of hypervigilance around perfection and getting it right and living your life for other people and what they want you to do or believe you should be doing. This lives and grows inside of these types of conditional loving behavior. This is another reason why I want you to read the 4 Agreements, because Don Miguel talks a lot about conditional love and domestication and how we are all domesticated with systems of punishment and reward. And so typically you're rewarded when you're doing, quote, good job or doing it right. And then you're not rewarded, you're punished if you do something wrong. So depending on who is raising you, they have their own gauge for right and wrong. And we're essentially domesticated until we can domesticate ourselves with our own systems of punishment and reward, which is why you probably have a series of agreements or beliefs, standards that you are trying to hold yourself to in your life. And when you don't hold yourself to those standards, then you are disappointed in yourself. So remember that while this work is about our relationship to other people, it is also about the relationship to self. And that if you're living in a constant space of feeling disappointed in yourself, then it's time for you to check in on your beliefs and agreements around the expectations that you have for yourself in your life. What expectations feel genuine, that they're coming from love? You know, for me, Marisa, I expect you to stay sober. I expect you to heal and grow and work on yourself. I expect you to take care of your body. I expect you to do your best to put good, nutritious food in it. I hold you to a standard. Now, that doesn't mean that if I am not holding myself to that standard, then I go into this huge place of punishment anymore. But that's how it used to be for me, because now I don't believe in perfection. And I gave myself permission to be imperfect and to always be changing my mind on what the expectations I'm going to have for myself are. So I would love for you to check in with how you feel people are disappointed in you, or the stories you have about how disappointing you may be. And I'd love for you to check in to see where those stories were created and who told you that you had to make X amount of money, or you had to have this many children, or you had to get married, or you had to be attracted to this sex, or you had to wear these clothes. All of the things that we have in our lives that we're told we need to be. And what part of your story do you want to reclaim and take back? And how can you check in with those beliefs and agreements and have a new, what Don Miguel calls in the Four Agreements, is a book of law, all the laws that you live by. Well, your book is probably really old and filled with a lot of laws from other people. So now you're being inspired to create your own book, to decide what your expectations are. So in relationship to other people, when you are living in a belief or agreement that it's safer not to disappoint, then you continuously are becoming who other people need you to be. You're shape-shifting, you're adjusting. Even when everything in your body says no, and you're still saying yes. This mastery at anticipating needs in order to avoid conflict. And when someone is disappointed with you, it feels like danger. You feel guilt and shame. And you can go into these guilt and shame spirals where you're just beating yourself up over and over again. But here's the thing about disappointment. It's inevitable. It's inevitable and it's survivable. It's not the same as being betrayed, and it's not the same as being abandoned. It's not the same as being hated. It's not. Disappointment is natural. And if you check in on all of your disappointments, because I'm sure you have disappointments with people that you still love. So disappointment is a survivable thing. And when you continuously try to avoid it, you're telling yourself over and over that it's not survivable. Let your relationships be resilient enough to experience disappointment. And let your relationship to yourself be resilient enough to love yourself even when somebody is disappointed in you. These compliance patterns take a lot of deep inner reprogramming. And it's a slow process that requires so much awareness, so much compassion, and so much patience until you really believe at your core that your job is not to keep everyone else comfortable. But your job, your sacred purpose, your holy longing, a big one, is coming into a place of love and reverence for yourself and allowing yourself to live this life that you have, to truly live it, not just survive it. And guess what? Sometimes that means disappointing people. And guess what? It's not a failure. It's actually an act of integrity for yourself. So I want you to check in with yourself if you want to go a little bit deeper, asking yourself, what beliefs and agreements do I have about the expectations that I have for myself? Where can I compassionately deserve where I'm in a place of disappointment for myself? And can I check in with that voice and be like, is this my voice? Or is this my dad that I'm hearing over and over? Or my ex-husband? Or my mother? Or just whose voice is that? Is it mine? A lot of times people go, yes, it's my voice, Marisa. I really, really believe this. And I know that feels a truth. It is a truth. You do believe it. Your ego believes it. But your soul and your spirit, I don't agree. I don't think your soul or your spirit believes it. I think your higher self absolutely knows it's not true, and that's why it hurts. In the last one, I honestly feel like I could probably do an entire episode on this, but I'm going to throw it in here because I think it's important. There is a core belief that happens in compliance patterns and low self-esteem patterns that if I leave, I will be replaced. Or if I leave, this person is going to be in so much pain and finally get it and finally figure it out. And then the next person is going to get the better version of them. So in compliance, we're staying in unhealthy relationships and in unhealthy patterns because we're afraid. We're afraid of being left. We're afraid of being replaceable. We're afraid of never finding somebody better. So we shapeshift ourselves to fit in a container that might actually not be what is so good for us. But what I believe is that we're all trying to fill hole and void in our lives because we want a sacred love. We want a beloved. We want our divine match. And what I have come to truly understand is that my beloved and my divine match is me. And that doesn't mean that I can't have a beloved outside of me, but if I am not my own beloved, then I will always live in fear. And I will always be trying to fill this void that I think that someone outside of me, a great, great love, the perfect match, will fill for me. because I really don't believe that this belief and fear of being replaced comes from our soul. It comes from wounds. The truth is that you're not disposable and you're not interchangeable. But if you stay where you're not being seen and you're not being valued or appreciated or loved in the way that you would like to be loved, then you're really going to start to believe that you are. Give your partner or person or next relationship an opportunity to love you for who you are, not a shape-shifting version. Because what I came to understand is that my partner wasn't going to leave me, Marisa, in her courage and strength and love. He would be leaving the wounded one. He would be leaving the woman who was insecure and anxious and codependent. Or I would be leaving because I was insecure, anxious, and codependent. I didn't want to leave a relationship that way. I wasn't sure. I've talked about this in the other one. What's mine? What's theirs? I knew I was living from so much fear that I wanted to give myself an opportunity to be in the relationship that I was in as a woman who was in love with herself. And then I wanted that woman to choose. And that's why if you return to the Should I Stay or Should I Go episode, that's why I'm telling you that a lot of this is you working on yourself. Every time you're not ready to leave because you don't trust yourself. So you got to keep turning towards yourself and building that trust. So in the same way of the obsessive thought, or should I stay or should I go, I really want to invite you, if you're so afraid to leave because you're going to be replaced or they're going to be better for you, that thought process is not really worth your time. It's like a fake loop. And I say this with love, but it is a loop of someone who is coming from codependency. When you are in a loving relationship with yourself and you're comfortable with yourself, you are no longer afraid of being alone, and you will no longer be afraid of what that other person may or may not change into. You are no longer afraid that somebody else might get a better version. Now, that doesn't mean you wouldn't be hurt or sad or grieve or have those experiences. But I remember when I got to the place where I was like, you know what? It's okay. Good for them. I hope they get to a place where they love themselves enough to receive love. And then I also trusted that I would have my own great love too. I would have my own great love story. And it wouldn't just be with another partner, but I would have a great love story with myself. A question I began to ask myself all along the way is, if I wasn't afraid, what would I do? And my guess is you know the answer, but it's not the answer to the right question that you need right now. Where you need to be focusing is on your fear and why am I so afraid? And how can I turn towards myself so I trust myself to make hard decisions? How can I love myself through my fear? That's where you are on the journey. And I don't think that ever goes away. We will be faced with new relationships and changes and shifts and our own fear. And we're going to bump up against people that activate things in us. But what you do have that maybe you didn't have before, or that you're being reminded of or you're deepening into now, is awareness. Thank you so much for being here. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'll see you on the other side. Thank you for being here with me. If something in this episode landed, if it stirred something in your heart or helped you feel less alone, please give me a rate and review and share with a friend. You can always learn more about me and what I offer at healwithalchemy.com. And if you're longing for community, for live connection and real conversation, I host a free Healing Our Relationships circle on the last Thursday of the month on Zoom. You can join us by downloading my app, HealSpace. It's free, and the circle lives right there in the app, along with my meditations, offerings, and a space to be seen. If you're ready to go deeper, I'll be guiding Awakening Woman, my next in-person retreat in Sedona this November. A weekend of breathwork, healing, ritual, sisterhood. It's a powerful space for transformation, and there are a few spots left. My next Mystery School cohort opens this October. It's a sacred container for women walking a spiritual path. We work with archetypes, shadow, and the divine feminine, and it's a full journey around the sun. 12 months, 6 women. You'll find all the details for retreat, mystery school, and so much more at healwithalchemy.com. Come find the space that speaks to you in your season. I'm so grateful to be here with you, and I'll see you soon.